Welcome to Baseball Biz. I'm Mark Carbett, your host, and with me, of course, is Mr. Brandon No Way, also known as Sports Splits Pod. How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing pretty good, Mark. How about you?
I am doing fantastic. You know, one of the great things about working with you is that, well, you're a guy who really understands more than just baseball. Me, I live in this very tight little world of baseball and very little else. I'm dependent upon folks like you to be able to give me some kind of insight because God knows I don't have it.
Well, I appreciate it. That's why I gave myself Sports Splits Pod back in the day.
That's right. That's where folks can find you on Twitter. And you can find me at the Baseball Biz on Twitter. Now that we've done all that self-plugging and promoting, let's get down to what's going on this week, man. Here we are in February. I guess this is our second show of the month. You think about this month. I mean, this is the month when you've got St. Patrick's Day, and folks may be drinking a lot of green beer, and some after effects may not be what anybody really wants, but that's part of the celebration. And then we got Valentine's Day. You know, we share the love. Let the loved ones we know, we give them gifts. All this great event. I mean, you can just feel the cherubs and little Valentines just bubbling over. And I mean, some people recount Valentine's Day. They think of that St. Valentine's Day massacre. And I think maybe that's more what we had the other day.
I was going to say, I don't really celebrate either of these holidays.
I'll give you one more. And it's not necessarily a holiday, but it's a day of February. And that is Ash Wednesday. And that's a day when we recount death long before resurrection comes. And when, ashes to ashes. And some could say maybe that's what the CBA. Sorry, no disrespect to anybody's faith. But yeah, it's a time of reflection, a time of denial that begins with Lent. And doggone it, folks, I don't know about denial when it comes to Major League Baseball and the Players Association and them working up on an agreement.
Hey, don't worry. I've celebrated Ash Wednesday before, so I'll give you the pass on that one.
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate. Yeah, but it is interesting. I mean, we're looking at one other thing. Oh, and one other thing that I failed to mention is February 9th, the day before Rob Manfred gave his press conference. It was pizza day, man. I neglected to celebrate it. I got some cold pizza in the fridge, and I'll have that later.
Hey, I had some pizza and wings yesterday, so I have leftovers for lunch here a little bit when we wrap up recording here.
Okay, man. All right, we've been involved you enough, folks, with what our personal lives are and all the loves of February. It is a time where we have been trying to figure out what the heck is going on. There's a lot of back and forth between the Players Association and Major League Baseball with the Commissioner, Rob Manfred, sharing what they're doing or not doing to help us enjoy another season of baseball in 2022. Now, not everybody spends a lot of time thinking about this, and probably that helps their health. But if we're looking at this, Brandon, these two sides have to come up with an agreement before there's actually going to be a season. What did it start? It started out with, they've been negotiating and talking about this for like 2 years. And we got up to a point back and forth. It seems to be rather intransigent on both sides. Then on December 1st, MLB let it be known that, guess what? We're going to lock you guys out as of December 2nd. Hopefully that's going to facilitate some change. Hopefully both parties will be kind of forced. This lockout is going to help us make a decision. And by the way, we're not going to talk to you guys for a while.
Yeah, we're going to use this to propel the urgency and get both of us to the negotiating table to hammer out this deal. But first, let us take a vacation throughout the holidays. And that was what, like a 40-day vacation almost?
Yeah, it was stupefying. I was looking at, let's see, what was it? Oh, February 4th, Major League Baseball Players Association, they came out with a press release, and they said 2 months after implementing their lockout, and just 2 days after committing to players that a counter proposal would be made, the owners refused to make a counter and instead requested mediation. Now, mediation, what they're actually looking at is trying to get somebody from the federal government to sit down with them and say, okay, guys, you're not playing well together. Here's what we need to do. I never feel like having a third party in there. I mean, it's like sitting between your parents when they're arguing, and they're going to let the small child come in who knows nothing about the argument and come in and say, Mom, Dad, this is really needs your stuff together. Okay. Here's the points. Or quit arguing, and we're going to do anything, and we're going to go be a family and still go on the family vacation.
I made the joke a couple weeks ago that, maybe they have like Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn doing the mediating like in Wedding Crashers, but I mean, I'm starting to think they have Beavis and Butthead running the negotiations the way this party's going.
I don't think a moderator will pull them in, but we will see. That the MLB Players Association said, no, we're not interested. We're adults. We should be able to figure this out ourselves. So this week, while the Players Association and I think MLB were sitting out in Arizona trying to knock out a few things, the owners in a quarterly meeting they have were in Orlando, Florida, and they were coming up with some strategies. So this is like their quarterly meeting. Rob Manfred was going to have a press conference and enlighten us all on February the 10th. Now, that was Thursday. And it was interesting on Wednesday and everything else coming up prior to Manfred's conference. A lot of people, as always, speculate about what is going to be said, what new knowledge, what new information is going to be imparted upon us. And it didn't take much just looking on Twitter or anywhere else to see some different opinions on that. Who was the one that you sent me the other day?
Yes, it was Eugene Friedman, and I believe it was Sarah Sanchez, one of our good friends who retweeted it. So give her a follow as well. He tweeted out, today the commissioner will hold a press event to say that spring training will be delayed, and he will try to place the blame on MLBPA. He's the one who wanted to jumpstart negotiations. Then his side took a 43-day Christmas vacation. Now they are refusing to make a proposal. And he said many other things in a series of tweets. He had like six tweets. So I'd definitely go give that a read, as he made some pretty good points, even though the announcement of spring training being delayed was off. Outside of that, I think he made some really good points that are worth reading.
Okay. And he wasn't the only one thinking that the announcement for spring training is going to be off. You and I were talking about before the show, a lot of organizations, before they send out a press release or before they say anything, they float out a balloon. There's a leak in the organization, and here's what they had to say. That goes out to the news groups, and therefore they may go ahead and put that information out. And I'm not saying what's what happened with Friedman. Once it got back to MLB, that sounds like, well, we're getting some negative feedback about us saying we're going to, we're going to suspend spring training. Not going to suspend spring training, but it's going to be a little later. And why don't we just say we're working hard to make this happen? So I don't know. I'm not going to guess the inner workings of MLB because they continually surprise me.
Just when you think you've seen it all with them, they come up with new ways to surprise you.
Yeah. And if we want to take a look at what the surprise was the other day when Manfred spoke, let's see, it was very interesting. It's about like 20, 25 minutes tops, this whole little session he had. And he spoke for about five and a half minutes. And then the rest of that time he did a Q&A. I'm not necessarily a big fan of his, but I think he did better than a lot of times in the past. Some of the critical parts he was wanting to talk about in the beginning, we'll go down the list real quick and maybe we'll hit a couple of them. Before he got into the labor dispute, he said, well, the owners have met, and here at our quarterly meeting, some of the things we wanted to talk about was local media, and that's with the RSNs. I will say what that is in a moment. On-field play, things are happening there. They have a competition committee, changes in minor leagues, diversity, and also some ideas with strategic international planning. Let's talk for a moment, Brandon, about the local media RSNs, regional sports networks, the RSNs. What's been some of the discussion on that?
Yeah, one of the pretty much the RSNs are where your teams are basically watched all the time. Like we have Bally Sun or Bally Florida, or Bally Midwest, all those places. So that's pretty much what an RSN is, and where most of the teams get their big money revenue. Right.
I mean, and that's something we don't normally see because each one of the teams, they're not putting their books out in front of the fans, showing how much money they got. We can do a whole show on that another time. We've talked about it in the past. one of the big things I think with the RSNs is the regional sports networks are looking at having the rights to stream the games and not just show them on a local cable station. And I think there's probably some questions about blackouts, et cetera, that they might be addressing. So we'll see what comes on that. And so another item on there that I wanted to at least touch base on, Manfred just simply said they're also looking at some different things with diversity. And that seems a little timely too, especially when you think what's been happening with the NFL.
Yeah, the NFL, and it's funny how they're doing this big push for diversity and equality campaign the past couple of years, but they're also being sued for like unfair hiring practices or whatever the official title is. I don't know exactly what what's called, but and if you haven't noted, if you don't know what's going on with it, Brian Flores was the coach of the Dolphins the past couple of years, and people thought he was a really good coach, and they started off slow, but they ended the season really well, but they didn't make the playoffs. And it came out on Black Monday, as they call it, that he was fired, and really everybody was surprised about it. And he wound up getting like sham interviews. Like he got a text from Bill Belichick saying, "Hey, congratulations on getting the Giants job." And it turns out he was on his way to get to that interview, but they already had their candidate picked out. He's suing for that. There's valid points with it because the Texans were looking to hire Josh McCown, who was a high school coach this year. And then they wound up pivoting after the lawsuit and hiring Lovey Smith, who he is a black coach. And, that got raised some eyebrows around the league, and people were like, is that kind of like a token hire, for lack of a better term?
Well, and that's the thing of it is it's timely. It's Super Bowl week. All the eyes are on FL, on the NFL, except those that are on MLB and the sanity going there. I don't know. Lovey Smith I think he's had some ups and downs, but if they were looking at hiring a high school coach before him, I think that his merit's probably a little higher than that, man. But it's not something that's new. And it's kind of interesting that both the commissioner of the NFL and MLB felt the need to be out with a press conference about this. And, it is a topic that needs to be addressed. It's something that has long since been an issue, whether it be with managers, coaches, and owners. The limited amount of opportunity for minorities and certainly for African Americans has been low, almost nil. So it's an issue that needs to be brought up. So I was glad to see that was on the owner's agenda this past week.
Yes, it's just one of those things to me. It's like, why is this still a problem this day and age in 2022?
I'm with you, brother. Well, after Manfred got through some of those first points, he decided to talk a little bit more about labor. Part of that was talking about, how that was with the fans. So let's go ahead and play that audio.
With respect to labor, let me start with the most important point. The clubs, our owners fully understand how important it is to our fans that we get the game on the field as soon as possible. We want to reach a fair agreement with the Players Association, and we want to do that quickly. We have listened carefully throughout this negotiation, and we have moved towards the players on key areas in an effort to address their concerns.
What do you think of that, Brandon?
Listening to that, I immediately think I don't understand what they're saying, because he says it's important to our fans to get the game on the field as soon as possible, and we have listened closely and moved closer to the players. But this whole time we've talked about how there seems to be no urgency at all from the league side of things. And it seems like the union's the only side that's negotiating, as they're putting out proposals. It seems like every 2 weeks they're putting one out there. And MLB's just has their hands under their legs, not knowing, or they're sitting on their hands, not knowing what to do and not communicating with them.
Yeah, I mean, I think this past week that the Players Association had actually submitted another proposal to Major League Baseball and hadn't heard anything back. And I thought it was interesting that that the MLB's answer was actually this press conference of the day. At least that's the way I read it. supposedly some of the things that MLB's come up with. They were looking at addressing some things with service time. I think they felt like they're addressing that. And the one thing just continues to amaze me. Oh, yes. And we agree that we'll have the designated hitter across both leagues. Just quit. I almost feel like my tongue burns every time I say that, because it's like, it's a non-issue. It helps everyone. It's not like a big favor to the players.
Isn't that something that they can really just add in the off season anyways? It seems like they're just throwing it out there to say like, hey, look, we did something. We accomplished something.
Yeah.
Hang it on the fridge.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, Brandon. It's just insane. Okay, but there's a lot of pain, Brandon. I mean, when you think about this, players, if the season doesn't start on time, there's potentially loss of some income. And the owners, they have to do some things too. I know Manfred had a little bit to say about that too. Let's hear that now.
Where the clubs have been and remain unwilling to move is in response to player proposals that we believe will undermine the competitive balance in our game. For example, the players' insistence that we reduce revenue sharing will without question lead to less competition, not more. Changing the current agreement by taking resources from clubs with relatively limited revenue will make the game less competitive. And when you think about it, it's like asking people to take a pay cut.
Okay, pay cuts. I'm sorry, we're talking billionaires here. And I think most people are going to have a little bit of difficulty with sympathy for the pay cuts for those billionaires. And I'm not even sure what that means. I know what he's saying as far as the competitive balance tax and how that impacts some of those poor teams like maybe Kansas City or Pittsburgh Pirates, some of the other teams in the lower rungs of who have a budget for a team. And quite honestly, I think maybe the problem is that they shouldn't have a team in the first place if they're not going to invest in it, either with great talent, like the Rays do with Nylander, or some money to buy some talent. But yeah, I'm sorry about the whole pay cut thing. How do you feel about that?
This is where the grievance came in that the PA filed against these teams to figure out what they were doing with their revenue sharing, and like if they were just pocketing it or if they're actually were spending it. And I think that's something that would need to get handled first before going more into this, because it's easy to say, oh, well, we give them the money, they have to spend it, don't they? But I mean, just looking at our owner that we have here, I'm not entirely sure if he does, but I wouldn't be surprised if he just pockets the whole thing.
Yeah, because there's not necessarily any kind of strings attached to that money. I think they say you need to spend it to better those things on the field, and from what I've read elsewhere, that it's not necessarily even on the field. It could be things you do in the front office. It could be any number of things. It doesn't mean that an investment in players to improve the game. With all these things going on, Brandon, I mean, I keep asking myself, when is spring training? Is it going to happen? We were talking about earlier, what is it? Within about a week, the pitchers and catchers are supposed to report to the spring training. None of that's going to happen until this agreement's in place.
Yeah, Manfred he says he's an optimist in that, I mean, the way he's going, he's saying that there's going to be a deal this weekend and everything's going to happen on time. But I mean, just the way everything's going and looking at the player reaction, I don't buy that it's happening on time. And I think at this point, opening day happening on time is pretty much is out the door and gone, in my opinion.
Yeah, let's hear how Rob presented that at the press conference yesterday.
Okay. Oh, I thought you guys were done.
Rob, what is the status of spring training?
Look, the status of spring training is no change right now. We're going to have a conversation with the MLBPA about the calendar. We understand where the calendar is, but until we have that conversation and until we see how this session on Saturday goes, it's no change.
Okay, let's see how that session on Saturday goes. Okay, what does that mean? Here we are, the MLB. We're going to meet with you guys on Saturday, Players Association. I know there's been a lot of things we can't agree on, but we're going to get this knocked out on Saturday so we can have a spring training that starts on time. As you said a moment ago, likelihood of that is none, nil. Nothing's going to happen.
Well, first of all, holy hell, that laugh. I mean, you were talking about St. Patrick's Day and drinking. I think Manfred maybe had a few before the conference to liven himself up. I've never seen him as lively as he was before. I mean, hearing him laugh, that was very uncomfortable. I mean, it was like, it's like the uncomfortable laugh you do when somebody tells a joke that's very uncomfortable and should not be said, but you just laugh because you're afraid you'll talk to them more.
Yeah, it did have that feel to it. It's like, really? Is this your normal laugh when you're around friends and family and you hear something, or like it sounded like an embarrassed laugh? That was an off-color joke, and I just don't. That off-color joke sounds a little but wow. So we will see. Status of spring training is no change.
I do have a tweet from Stroman that was kind of in response to Jeff Passan and his question on spring training and regular season starting. So Passan asked, if he thinks opening day will be as scheduled on March 31st. And he said, I'm an optimist and I believe we'll have an agreement in time to play our regular season schedule. And Marcus Stroman, he's been very active on Twitter lately, commenting on a whole bunch of this stuff. He tweeted in response to Passan's tweet, so he's cool with putting every player at risk by skipping spring training and going right into season. Makes sense. And the facepalm emoji.
Yeah. And you and I were talking previously before all this. I recognized the what I want to say, the irony of what he's trying to point out. When you look back during the COVID season of 60 games, the limited amount of time for spring training, because what happens, man, this is time when, people have to loosen up. They have to get better. They have to strengthen their bodies. And when you don't work within the framework that we've had with that in the past, it's like, 4 weeks, when you don't give them all the time that they need, injuries happen. During the COVID seasons, I think we had a higher injury rate than normal.
I mean, spring training back during the COVID season, that was 20 days, something like that.
Yeah.
And that's the reason spring training is still so long, is because more so pitchers need that ramp up time, because they can't just, show up and then 3 weeks later go 7 innings full speed. They have to have that slow ramp up time, and hitters, even though it's not as important to them, they still kind of use it just to get their timing down. So when the season comes in, they're a little bit more timed up.
Right. And if you cut the amount of time, say it's 5 weeks with pitchers, and you cut that down to 3, surprise, surprise, if there's not some difficulties and injuries that come with it. So I hope whatever happens, that if they do have a spring training, simply because helping those players get in shape. Spring training is fun to go to when you're a fan. One thing I'll say about spring training going as a fan, folks, if you've done any of this, don't have high expectations to see the starting 9, if you will, because they're sometimes they have 2 different teams. They may have an A team and a B team, and they're going to mix people in and out. So if your favorite outfielder, you may get to see an inning or 2 of them. But the main thing about spring training, while it's great for us fans, it's more important to make sure that these athletes are in good shape and reduce the potential for injuries.
And you get to see the great spring training numbers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's looking at what their numbers are as far as RBIs and averages and all that, ERAs. It doesn't make any sense, not during spring training.
Oh, I was talking about like the jersey numbers, like, the guys are like 97 or numbers that you don't normally see.
Yeah, that keeps it pretty interesting too. So it's like, who is that guy? What's that number? Oh, man. But yeah, we were talking about that thing with Manfred in the opening day being the optimist. Just for grins and giggles, let's play that.
Rob, do you believe that we will have opening day on March 31st?
I am an optimist, and I believe we will have an agreement in time to play our regular schedule.
You're an optimist, but are you prepared to miss regular season games if it comes to that? Have you sort of given consideration to what both the short and long-term adverse effects that might have on the sport's totality?
If I hadn't given consideration to what it would mean to miss games, I wouldn't be doing my job. Obviously, I pay attention to that. I see missing games as a disastrous outcome for this industry, and we're committed to making an agreement in an effort to avoid that.
All right, Robbie. So, I mean, I love this, Brand. First, we're starting out. I am an optimist, and I believe that we will have an agreement to play our regular schedule. Note, he said, we'll have an agreement to play our regular schedule. That doesn't necessarily entail that schedule will start on time. So does that mean, yeah, we're probably going to have spring training, but we're not going to say that it starts on that date, but we'll still have a regular schedule. It's 162 games.
I mean, at this point, I think just trying to cram in 162 games if opening day is delayed, it seems like it'd just be too much on the players with travel and no rest days. I think it'd be too much of a load on them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they do the All-Star game or not, or postpone it, but I don't think you can move everything back, because November baseball, where it's freezing cold in a lot of places, that just doesn't sound fun.
No, not at all. I don't see a regular schedule if they can't come together quickly. And I don't see that happening. In the one reporter, you heard her ask, she said, "Are you prepared to miss games?" And he said, "I see missing games as a disastrous outcome for this industry." And, what can you do to avoid a disastrous outcome and missing games? You don't shut down shop for about 2 months. You keep up the conversation. You keep talking between folks. So if you don't want a disastrous outcome, why the heck did you put a lockout in place?
Well, I don't know how much Manfred is doing in negotiations. I'm sure he has a hand in it, but I'm sure owners have a big hand as well, or if not, more of a hand than he does. If they say that they know it's a disastrous outcome for missing games, they're doing a whole lot of talking, but not a whole lot of walking. Because, I mean, you lock the players out. You don't talk at all for another month and a half. And now you're saying, oh, it's a disastrous outcome if we miss games. That's common sense. Do a little bit more work. And here's the thing. We've said it a million times already. Baseball is losing interest from people.
Yeah.
And the world and country is not in the mood for millionaires and billionaires arguing over money. They're just not in the mood for that and carrying on about that, especially because that soft deadline here is in 48 hours from now at the time of recording. So unless they get something done, the heat's going to be ramped up even more.
Yeah, I can only wonder what the next press conference will be like. He's setting groundwork to make it sound like, this disastrous outcome for the industry. But what have you done? What are the folks at the table done? And you were saying, while Rob he's not necessarily in the room with all that. And I didn't have this to queue up, but he was saying that he's done a great job since '98, since he's been there. He indicated there hadn't been any work stoppage.
Well, as Olivia Rodrigo said, good for you. Okay. Look, what about right now?
What about right now?
How they've met, like 4 days out of the past 2 months?
Yeah.
How many hours have they actually spent together? Because I'm pretty sure they're not spending all day and night together.
No, and one of the more recent things I read was that it was a heated discussion. They didn't say they were actually shouting across the table, but you got the sense that emotions got into play. And the only emotions that should be involved in baseball are the fans in the stands. Guys, get it done. So you talk about, of course, they were asking about the logistics, actually getting players to spring training. Okay, great. You go ahead, you get the deal done. How are you going to get them there? And something you and I talked about before the show was how many free agents are still out there? I heard one person's guess was around 300. Now, I don't know if that's accurate or not, but can you imagine, even if it's just 100 free agents out there, who's going to be able to negotiate and get them out there, picked on a team, come up with some sort of agreement dollar-wise that makes sense, and actually get them into spring training to be a component that's part of that team on opening day?
I mean, that just seems like a disaster waiting to happen because everything is going to be rushed. You're going to have to rush for a contract. Because I mean, if you're a free agent right now and you follow Manfred's timeline of a week from deal signed to spring training opened up, you're probably going to miss a good amount of spring training if you're doing some legitimate negotiating.
Yeah.
And your spring training is going to be rushed. Everything's going to be in overdrive. So that's probably not great for your health wise. And even for the players that have deals, what about accommodations for spring training? I don't know how many of them like have houses down here or like they Airbnb or hotel stays, but how quickly can they arrange something like that?
Yeah, that's going to have to be like magic, man. I don't know how they'll pull that together. There's transportation managers at each ball club, and I'm sure those folks are scampering with all kinds of alternate plans of what they may have to do. I keep saying I want to get one of those folks on the show. I think that'd be a great discussion, finding out these are the people who have to make arrangements from hotels during the regular season as well. And when a player is switched from one team to another, they have to do all that. But yeah, I don't know how they're going to be able to do that and do it well or effectively necessarily with such a short time span to make that decision. Manfred went on a little further talking about in order to be a good labor relations manager, you need to be an optimist. What was interesting to me too is during this press conference, I expected really to hear nothing but about the agreement. And that's what we heard for the most part. And did you hear from out in the audience? There's a reporter who's asked, he says, hey, Rob, would you like maybe to talk about something else? I got another kind of question for you. So Manfred says, yeah, I welcome that. And I thought I recognized that voice. Did you hear it?
I wasn't listening closely when he first asked the question. But I was like, who is asking a question like that? And then I figured out who it was, and I was like, oh, well, that makes a little bit more sense now.
Yeah, it was about the Tampa Bay Rays, and who's going to be on top of that?
Your good friend Mark Topkin.
That's right, man, Mark Topkin. He's the, if folks who don't know, he's like with the Tampa Bay Times. He is the sports guru on following everything with that team. And he's got the little sardonic sense of humor now and then. I guess you could say that when how he posed the question to Manfred about the Tampa Bay Rays. He's talking about, the urgency of them getting something done for the team and what's actually happening. Because, folks, if you haven't been paying attention, Tampa Bay's owner, Stu Sternberg, has been working toward a 2-city team. And that got the kibosh, I guess, maybe about 2 weeks ago. MLB swatted it like a fly to the table. Yeah, that idea has absolutely no place. We think Tampa Bay can do well by having the team just there. So, Topkin, it wasn't surprisingly he asked about this. What's going on with some kind of sense of urgency? Well, let's hear what Manfred had to say.
Look, we do have a sense of urgency with respect to the Tampa situation. I think the club being in, and they have been in, a substantial period of uncertainty as to where they're going to play, which, in turn dictates the economic outlook for the franchise. That's a bad thing. It's a bad thing for a business. It hampers the ability of the business to operate and the club to operate in the most effective way. So we do have a sense of urgency. My hope is that Tampa, the officials in Tampa Bay in the region, I've gotten educated on that pretty good, in the region, and the Rays can work together to find a solution that'll keep a full season of baseball in Tampa. We think Tampa's a major league market, and we want to find a solution that makes the club economically viable in that market.
Well, as a Tampa Bay fan, all I can say is my heart is just full of joy thinking of, wow, what Bob Manfred had to say there, man. That Tampa Bay is a major league market.
I sat there when he said that, and I was like, are you guys just now realizing this? I mean, the market's hosted Super Bowls, has 2 world-class championship-level organizations. One actually was awarded best franchise in all of sports, not just North America, all of sports. So there's that. And the quote he said about the uncertainty of where someone's going to play, it hampers business and operations. Well, yeah, the owner doesn't seem to understand that when you
No.
have well over a decade of jerking people around saying, oh, well, we're going to do here. Oh, we're going to do here. Oh, but we don't want to pay that much money. But guess what? We're going to split the season here. Don't you think that's going to wear thin after a while and people are just going to throw their hands up and say, you know what? You do you. I don't care anymore. I mean, is that unfair?
No, not at all. And like I said, I don't always have much sympathy for Manfred or for the owners, but if the way things played out, when Manfred was saying a couple of years ago that the owners and he were 100% behind a twin sister, a twin city program, and then they slammed it down the other day. I have trouble pretty much believing anything that comes out of MLB's mouth about Tampa Bay Rays. You and I've had this before as conversation. Say, yeah, I'm good for a 2-city program. Make it St. Pete and Tampa. There's your 2-city program.
Yeah, there are 2 cities, although people think Tampa is just one giant city.
That's right. They play in St. Pete. We're in Tampa Bay. I'm very glad to hear that Rob thinks that Tampa is a major league market, but I don't think it would put MLB off from selling the franchise to another market.
I mean, they can do that if they want, but I think that they're losing a ton of money because this is the biggest market. This would be the biggest market without a Major League Baseball team, and you have to go down a substantial amount of them to get to a market that doesn't have one.
Yeah.
And just after he was asked about the Rays, I don't remember who asked the question exactly, but he was asked, would you say that owning a baseball team is a good investment? And do we have the audio of that?
Yeah, let's dig that up. Here we go.
Would you say that owning a baseball team is a good investment?
It's interesting. We actually hired an investment banker, a really good one, actually, to look at that very issue. If you look at the purchase price of franchises, the cash that's put in during the period of ownership and then what they've sold for, historically, the return on those investments is below what you'd get in the stock market, what you'd expect to get in the stock market, with a lot more risk.
Wow. A lot more risk. That doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I'm looking back a couple of years ago, looking at what the Marlins, were so far. They did pretty well with that. And there's been some other ones. What have you seen on this? What have you read? Anything?
Well, first of all, if owning a baseball team is, such a low return or a risk, I don't think that there would be such thing as Major League Baseball today. Because, if you're going to lose so much money and take that big of a risk, why is there going to be a baseball league? So there's one thing I automatically thought that was wrong. And another point he brought up, or another point considering what he said, this comes from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This was written back in November of last year. And this was about the Braves because they're the closest team we can get to opening their books because they are publicly traded in a way. They wrote, quote, for the third quarter, the Braves operating profit before depreciation and amortization, the most common metric along with revenue for assessing a pro sports franchise economic performance, was $58 million. That was up from $6 million and $46 million in the corresponding quarters of 2020 and 2019, respectively. After depreciation, amortization, and stock-based compensation, the Braves showed an operating profit of $35 million for the most recent quarter. That was the third quarter of last year, so I believe that was like the summer months,
right? Compared
with the loss of $15 million in the third quarter last year. So those poor things. Throw them a penny next time you go to a Braves game.
Yeah, they can't take a pay cut, and obviously it's hurting with them actually seeing growth year over year. I don't know. MLB's not going to open up the books. If we didn't have the Braves, like you said, where it was owned publicly, we wouldn't even have that much information about it. So I would say that his remarks were questionable at best. If it's Politico, if you guys haven't ever seen Politico, that's a website that takes political remarks and decides whether or not if they're true, false, or pants on fire, if they're completely a lie. And I don't know. I would love to see Politico's evaluation of this whole press conference. That'd be something if they actually did that.
That's a genius idea. I mean, I wish there was a version of that for just all of sports, and just we kind of have that now with freezing cold takes a little bit, but
Yeah.
I want like a full blown liar pants on fire, things like that.
That would be great, man. You could have it, imagine even like during the games or things that were said, you could have a little bar at the bottom right of the screen that could highlight, say, so-and-so's comments here is completely incorrect. Are these stats, whatever, because we hear so much garbage all the time anyway. Yeah. I mean, run that completely live during Manfred's press conference or any of them, but that would have been funny. Oh boy. He kind of wrapped things up after talking about how bad of an investment it was to buy a baseball team, which seems kind of bad if you think that they're probably discussing expansion at some point.
Way to shoot yourselves in the foot there too, geniuses.
Oh Lord. Yeah.
Wow. Guess you got to pay that $2 million expansion fee.
Oh jeez. Well,
But it's a horrible investment. Will be cash or credit.
I think it'd be definitely credit. You take a look at some of the people who've invested in teams recently. I think Steve Cohen with the Mets may have been one of the most recent. Here you're talking about a guy who's all about like hedge funds and stocks, and he saw the Mets is, I think, something he enjoyed and loved, but I don't think he would have put the money in there if he thought it was a bad investment.
No, I don't think so. And like I said earlier, I don't think we'd have Major League Baseball if it was such a bad investment the way Manfred and the owners make it sound.
Oh, yeah. Well, he kind of wrapped things up with questions after that. And one of them was talking about, I think some of the remarks may have been about with Scherzer and Stroman, and others were saying, he says, his response to him was, I'm not really interested in what is being said on social media. I thought, well, maybe should be, because not just what players are saying. Maybe he was just talking about the players who were commenting about the CBA, but I would hope when they hear what the fans are saying on social media that they're paying close attention.
I mean, they probably should, because social media is a good way to get a pulse on what the fan base is thinking. Now, it's not like representative of everybody, but it's a good way to connect with their fans. And, I think if baseball did that a little bit more, they would maybe be a little bit more relevant and fan friendly, and just a bigger happy family if they were to do that and just listen.
Well, wrapping up that part of Manfred and what he had to say, let's take a look at what some other people are thinking. We're going to read some other people's mail here. Hopefully not break any federal statutes, because we're doing it digitally and taking a look here. I know. Okay, here's Jeff Passan, recent tweet this today here on Friday. Tomorrow is the most important day yet in baseball's labor battle, one that will chart the course toward opening day or its postponement. And Rob Manfred is at the center of it all. With the sport on the precipice, can he and MLB evolve? Well, and then, of course, he gives you a link to an ESPN story. I don't blame him for that. But if you start looking to see what others were saying from it, there's folks who aren't necessarily happy.
I have a couple tweets from Stroman and Trevor May.
Share those with us.
Scherzer, he tweeted out a week ago, we don't need mediation because what we are offering to MLB is fair to both sides. And he doesn't tweet much, so if he's saying something, it's probably worth something. Marcus Stroman, the players are ready, just waiting on Commander Manfred to stop ruining the game. Rob acting like he's living in Gilead, LMAO. May the Lord open on this blessed day.
Oh my gosh.
Well, I hope he had a blessed day as well. And Trevor May, I learned today that owning and operating a business is riskier than the stock market.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure running a business is pretty risky, but the stock market, you can lose all your money and go broke in about 5 minutes.
Looking at some of the remarks to Passan, one gentleman by the name of Danny Farrell wrote, I wonder if the owners will end the lockout this weekend, even if their proposal was rejected, and force the players to either play under the prior CBA rules of strike. It seems like that may be the best move from a PR standpoint. Might have something there. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I keep thinking back to Sotomayor, Justice. She was a federal judge back then in 95. And They came in without being invited. And said, as a federal court judge said, she came in, evaluated what both sides had to say, and instead of actually resolving all that, she said, go back, figure it out, and go back and end this strike and play. It's Tom Celio. He said, the most important day was December 2nd when Rob Manfred and MLB owners decided to lock out the league's players. Having insiders hype Saturday's meeting is nothing more than an MLB PR strategy to blame the players for upcoming delays that the owners in fact caused. Ooh.
I mean, he's not wrong, because I don't remember the owners really doing anything to try and prevent a lockout before.
No, I think that's well, there's a lot of other ones here in response to Jeff that I can't read, and I'm surprised that Twitter even allows them on there. Here's a simple one from a guy named Derek. He said, is it realistic to think that they strike a deal tomorrow, or is it more likely they meet again Sunday, Monday? Derek, guess what? It doesn't matter. It's not going to happen that quick. What else we got? They better not kill my weekend vibes. Here's a note. Is there something else going on in sports this weekend, Brandon?
Some bowl game, like Super Bowl, something like that.
Yeah, the Uber Bowl. No.
Oh no, shoot, we can't say that. That's a dirty word. That's,
oh my gosh,
the big game.
The big game. The big game's this weekend.
Sued.
Yeah. Well, we're not.
We're gonna have to bleep that out.
Absolutely not. The thing of it is, though, can you imagine if on Sunday there was an agreement? What would happen? I mean, let me stop for a second. During the regular baseball season, it completely irks me when I see news about other sports and I don't see anything about a baseball right out of the gate. Sometimes baseball gets buried as a third or fourth story, and there was a very interesting game happened the day before. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if during the Super Bowl that they actually lost a little traction because of some interest in what was going on with baseball? I don't think that'll happen, but it'd be interesting.
No, it would probably be like oh, good job, and then everybody would go back to the Super Bowl. But it would be very baseball to have arguably their biggest announcement in how long during the biggest event in the world, the big game.
Yeah,
nobody
halftime.
Notice.
Oh gosh, that'd be insane. Here's another one. We'll just read one or two more. This is from Jeremy, Progenitor09 on Twitter. Yeah, I love that. Saying that spring training would start on time was a tactic. No, okay, no big deal there. So now if the union rejects MLB's new proposal, they can turn around and say, see, we were on schedule and the players are now holding up the season. Okay, that's more of the same. Can't say anything about that one. That's too rude. Praying they get a deal, fingers crossed. If Rob Manfred is at the center, there's no hope for baseball starting on time. The season isn't starting on time, so save it. Yeah, just save it. Quit talking about this crap. We're done with it, okay? And save baseball, Jeff. Yes, that's straight to Mr. Passon. Well, I don't know. I'm done. Brandon, I said I wasn't going to even talk about this earlier because I was saying CBA. It's just the teams aren't playing, but this just seemed like we had to give it a little bit more coverage. It was,
yeah, we had to, and Manfred, he gave us all those sound bites for us to talk about. So it was like he was begging for us to do a show about it. So
thank you.
We say he makes it easy.
He does, man. He gives us the fodder that we need for this crazy show. All right, man. Well, let's wrap this up. If people are, yes, there's a game going on this weekend in football, and if you're not in tune with it, I don't think necessarily everybody knows who's playing. I was listening to a survey today. So some people said, isn't Tom Brady playing this year? No, he's not. Okay. So for those you missed that, and probably the same folks who missed National Pizza Day like I did on February 9th. But
putting Tom Brady in the Super Bowl is usually a pretty good bet.
True. Very true, but not this year. Oh, what else is going on? Oh, yeah. I mean, today's February 11th. Yesterday, the women's collegiate softball had their opening day. So that's going to be interesting what happened to that. I don't know if you saw any of that action last year, especially with the World Series finals with Florida State and Oklahoma, but that was pretty interesting. So I'm going to be staying on top of that. We also have somebody who's going to be visiting our show here in about a week, talking a little bit more about how the season's starting out.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear that interview.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty good. Here's one note, and I'll drop that during the show too. But in the last 5 NCAA softball collegiate World Series, Oklahoma has won 3 of the last 5. 3. Here's another one for you. Guess where every World Series collegiate game is being played? For I don't know how for the last many, many years, but the official site is Oklahoma.
His own cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like right. So I don't know. Well, I'm looking forward to that show. What else? Oh, yeah, men's collegiate baseball. That opening day for them is February 18th. So if you're waiting for regular baseball, these are some things you can be paying attention to, not to mention just that big game.
And shout out to USF. Last year, they made it all the way to the Super Regionals. Even they did get swept out in 2 games against Texas. But, hey, that's further than USF had ever made it in the baseball postseason. So hopefully they can build on that. And they sent home the Gators. So.
Yeah. So like you were saying, you think that USF was playing Florida. I mean, Florida's got some great things happening here. And so definitely worth watching the collegiate games, whether it be baseball or softball. And the day they need to keep in mind is April 8th. That's minor league opening day. It's going to be, to me, it's exciting. There's going to be some new changes and rule things that we can watch out for those. We'll talk about them in future shows. Also, something you may not know is that minor league baseball, the AAAs, they've actually extended their season by 6 games. So now they got a 150 game slate in 2022. So they're getting to look more and more. I mean, it's only 12 games less than the regular season for the major leagues. All right, that's about all I got, buddy. You got anything else you want to share?
No, I think I got all my shots out this show.
Well, I tell you what, that laughing boy Manfred, I just hope he's enjoying all that happened during Thursday. I mean, I'll give him kudos. I got to say it. I thought he did well as far as keeping a sharp press conference and giving his little speech. I don't know how much veracity there are to the things he said. He didn't seem completely fluttered. Maybe, as you suggested, he was just kind of a little bit more relaxed than in previous press conferences.
Just throwing that out there.
All right. So, Brandon, you want to take us home?
Yeah, sure. Make sure to like, rate, review this podcast, subscribe, and share with your friends. And thank you for listening, and hopefully we can see you again next week.
Thanks again, everybody, for listening to us here on Baseball Biz. And you can find Brandon at Sports Blitz Pod, and that's on Twitter. And you can find Mark at The Baseball Biz on Twitter. Plus, like I said, all the different directories out there that carry this. And we thank you again and look forward to talking with you again real soon. Special thanks to XTakeRUX for the music rocking forward.